I had to get a load of my mates into the phone unit and making some fake calls in order to look busy. So we hustled in those early days. Suffice to say, we didn't get that job. But project by project, year on year, we grew organically. And we went through a few recessions in that time, but we still managed to grow each year because we were marketing obsessed and really looking for that growth all the time, every time.
Hello team, and welcome to this episode of Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. It may also be called Cash Machines now, depending on when this episode is being released. Who we have here is a gentleman called Nick Hague. Now, Nick is currently the host of the world's greatest business thinkers podcast, which I highly recommend, but also spent, I think, 24 years building B2B International, which was a B2B customer research business that ultimately sold to Dentsu B2B. So this episode, we dig into that journey, understanding how you can build a UK-based B2B services company to roughly £20 million in revenue. And then we also talk about his transition into life as a podcaster. Before we do that, quick shout out to Fame for producing and promoting the show. If you like a show like this, head to fame.so and we can help you out. Let's jump into the episode with Nick now. Quick one. We talked about Raylo last month, and honestly, it's become our go-to for team tech. Every time we hire someone or bring on a contractor, instead of dropping a huge amount up front, we just subscribe to the latest tech through Raylo Business. This month, we've been looking at the new HP laptops, and with a MacBook Pro 5 rumors floating around, it's nice knowing we can upgrade without being locked in. It's a simple way to keep the team feeling motivated and equipped. The link is in the show notes. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tom.
So we're going to cover a couple of things. First, we're going to understand the B2B specific journey. Also in services, I understand, but we're going to dig into that business that you also ran with your dad, which I find fascinating. And then hopefully we're also going to get some gems of learnings from the world's greatest business thinkers podcast that you've been running for a while as well.
Yeah, that's taken me in a totally different direction there, but enjoying every step of that different journey.
So let's start off. And I would love to know the origin story of starting it was like a B2B customer or market research company, right? With your father.
It was, yeah. So it was a business-to-business specialism called B2B International. And well, going back before that, my dad had a previous research agency that he'd set up from his bedroom. He moved over from the Pennines, from Yorkshire to Manchester, and he set up his own market research agency just from his bedroom, sending out direct mail flyers in the late 1970s. That was called Business Market Research. So I grew up like with conversations around the kitchen table about market research. It never really interested me, although it was consumer and industrial research back in those days. So I quite liked it when he brought home, Ghostbuster chocolates or hedgehog flavored crisps to try. But, growing up with those conversations around the kitchen table, and then in the summer, looking to get some money in, I carried out telephone interviewing in the holidays. And so I learned a lot from those early days, in terms of being on the phones, trying to get busy people to take time out of their day to conduct the interviews, ask questions. But I think most importantly, and this has set me up well in the podcasting world, is listening. The art of the telephone interview and listening to the other person, the respondent on the other end of the telephone, as it was. And then I went to Manchester University, studied geology. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Geology was just like the best subject I did at school, and then I did it at A-level, and then ended up doing it at university. But there was no grand plan, so went off backpacking around the world for a year and a half, America, Europe, Asia, as a lot of people do. And then I called home one time. It was sort of in Australia. My dad said, listen, he'd left his previous company and he was thinking about setting up a specialist agency. He used the word of, you need to stop dossing around on a beach and in bar jobs and get a proper job. And so I came home and there was no grand plan. We founded B2B International in 1998. I never thought, I'd spend another 20 years working alongside my dad, but it was fun. We had a lot of good times, and a lot of people do say that, how can you make that work? What's it going to be like? But in the end, it was a good ride. I think in those early days as well, that the name B2B International, we remember sitting around the table with my dad and another business colleague who was setting it up together, and he'd done a lot of research in the States, and there was this term that was being used, B2B, But it wasn't strange as we sit here, now it's a generic term used B2C, B2B all the time. It just wasn't used back in the late 90s. And so we used to have to explain what B2B actually meant. In fact, I remember a client saying in the very first year, your website domain, which was b2binternational.com and still is, it's worth more than your actual company when websites were growing in those early days. So yeah, no grand plan, just ended up there and set something up. And, we grew it. Well, in 1997 to 98, we actually set it up. So, but from those humble beginnings, we grew to a global company, over 10 offices around the world, 120 staff, and a turnover of 20 million sterling when I left the company.
So did you mention there was another co-founder, or just you and your dad?
So it was myself and my dad, and then the other co-founder she was called Anne Kemp. So she'd worked for my dad's previous company, and he'd said, I'm leaving. He'd fallen out with the other directors, and he wanted to go in a specialist niche area of market research, business to business research. And she'd looked after the phone unit. So she said, listen, if you ever set up another company, I'll come and work for you. So yeah, it was myself, my dad, and Anne.
So did your dad split the equity evenly between the three of you?
He did. I mean, in the first instance, it was just 100% him, and we were on board, working. And then as we started to build momentum within that first year, then he split equity. It wasn't even across the board, because he had this grand plan of where he wanted to take the company. And so he wanted to always keep equity back in order to, entice new board members and, grow it as we did. So yeah, it evolved over the years.
Makes sense. And so did you say 10 offices? I guess it was 15, 20 years later when you left, right?
Yeah, I left 24 years later. Yeah. So
wow.
After setting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how did your role evolve?
I suppose as all, entrepreneurs and early setups, you're doing everything in the early days, making the tea, answering the phone. We set it up in the first instance. There wasn't a big grand plan, but we set it up thinking that we wanted to grow it. So, there was the three of us with this vision, and we set up the brand, to look, from a feel, from our marketing materials, from the website, like it was an established global company, and we invested in offices. We had just one base in South Manchester, but we could do our international research because we use the telephone a lot. But we invested in offices where we decked out a boardroom. We had a reception area. We didn't have a receptionist. All three of us picked up the phone. We had a phone unit that actually had, or it could have housed 20 people. We had 2 part-time staff, both English speaking, but one could speak French, one could speak German. And so, that was our field force in those early days. We weren't doing online research or anything like that. If we think back to 1998 when we did set up, Google set up the same year. So it was, we weren't all just using online panels in order to collect information. So yeah, we had offices that could cater for 20 telephone staff. We had an exec area opposite them for 8 people. So we did invest money, and we were looking to, position the brand in those early days. And we hustled. I suppose we were lucky in that my dad had a bit of a name already from his previous existence. So the odd brief came in, but it didn't come in like we thought it would. So we really had to put some marketing effort and dollars behind it. We built, I went through the market research buyer's guide by hand and individually put all these contacts into an Excel spreadsheet. And that was our contact database. And then we just mail those consistently every 2 weeks, different bits of information. And in the early days, I remember a brief landed from Renault over in France, and they had a big global customer satisfaction survey that they wanted us to pitch for. And they came over to check the offices out. Now, we actually had a residence, we had offices, but we didn't have many people to make it look that busy. So they came over, flew over. I don't know whether it was from Paris, I can't remember, but I had to get a load of my mates into the phone unit and be making some fake calls in order to look busy. So we hustled in those early days. Suffice to say, we didn't get that job, but project by project, year on year, we grew it and grew organically. And we went through a few recessions in that time, but we still managed to grow each year because we were marketing obsessed and really looking for that growth all the time, every time. We didn't maybe to our detriment, we never really celebrated big wins. Of course, we said that's great news, but we never popped the champagne or anything. It was always like, we got to do this and we've got to win a next job in. And it was relentless, but good fun along the way as well. We didn't sit back and rest on our laurels at all.
Yeah, that rail story is hilarious. Maybe your friends didn't look professional enough, and that's why they didn't give you the job.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think the offices as well, they were just far too clean. We just decked them out. No one was really working there. I remember putting pads of paper and pens and pencils on the desks, and it didn't look like a real office with, scruffy loads of paper everywhere. And so, yeah, we learned from those early days.
And what you were essentially running was old school ABM campaign to all these customer research buyers, right? If you're literally mailing them something every 2 weeks, like a case study or some recent information, like every 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And it was very different things, just to catch the retention. We were always about brand building. We were never about selling, because we know that you can't sell market research to someone that's not in the market for market research. So we needed to keep our brand at the forefront of people's minds. And so we were just giving them interesting things, whether it was a nice article that was about branding in itself. We'd put handwritten sticky notes onto this, put them in an envelope and say, thought this might be of interest. And then our details, we tested different things. We had a really good agency. They're still going now, Fox Agency. We're over in Leeds. Ben Fox is setting up his New York office right now. But they used to come back with some mad creative ideas of like butterflies with elastic bands. So when you open the envelope, this butterfly would fly out. And we did get a few messages back with people saying that they'd scalded themselves with hot tea once they'd opened the direct mail, but it caught their attention. And we just did different things in order to make sure that our brand got known. And it's weird how you go full circle now. I mean, one of my guests on the podcast is Rory Sutherland, and he talks a lot about the fact of the beauty of using direct mail now when everyone's gone to this digital world. No one gets post anymore. So you can really stand out if you're looking to get someone's attention as a brand.
Yeah, makes sense. He is a marketing legend, isn't he?
He is.
To clarify then, you didn't pop the champagne when you guys sold to Dentsu B2B?
Well, we did and we didn't. I suppose we said, job done, well done. But the deal itself, as you probably know, Tom, it was structured. Dentsu are a Japanese company. It was quite a complex deal. And within that deal, there's a bit of money up front, but then there was a 4-year earnout for everyone involved from a shareholder perspective. And we sold in October 2018, and the actual clock didn't start ticking until early January 2019. So we had all of those years to continue to grow. And if we think back to 2018, the world was again very different. This is pre-COVID. And if someone had said, here you go, Nick and team, good luck on your earnout, you're going to go through one of the biggest, craziest upturns in business. We were lucky in that sense because we were a good fit. I mean, doing our homework, we went out there when we decided to sell. So it was 2016 that I took over the total reins of the company, and my dad started to take a bit more of a back seat. And I decided there and then that organically we'd grown every year. And we knew, when we set up an office in Beijing, when we set up an office in Shanghai, Dusseldorf, New York, we knew what it took in terms of investment, and then how long it took to recuperate that. So rule of thumb is it was around and about £1 million sterling that we'd have to invest, both in terms of the office, rental, employment, marketing around it to make people aware. And we were setting up these offices because back in the days, people wanted someone to be close to them in order to, handhold them. And they just felt that was the way of doing business. So it was about £1 million sterling per office that we'd set up, and we'd break even after about a year and a half, something like that. And then, it'd start to be profit. We'd pull through. But that takes time. And I wanted to move quicker. And we were doing a big chunk of our business in the States. That was definitely where we were making a lot of the profit. It was evenly split, really, but a majority was in probably, I don't know, 2/3 maybe was in the States. And the third was split between Europe and Asia then after that. But we were seeing a lot of activity on our website, people visiting and not inquiring from the West Coast. From the tech sector, we could see HP, Hewlett Packard were coming on all the time, Apple, and we weren't getting these briefs through. So I wanted to move quicker. I wanted to get teams on the ground there. And I think after, so many years, we needed to really invest in our infrastructure, our IT infrastructure. Cloud computing was coming along. And we were a big global company then. So it was going to cost a fair bit. So I went out, I put it to the board. I said, listen, I think this is what we should do in order to grow, but it needs to be the right fit. And so we went out and did our homework and due diligence. And, there was a fair number of companies, but Dentsu was the one that we earmarked from the get-go to sell to. And it worked. And mainly because I think there was a good story and a good fit there, because they already had a B2B division. There was an agency called Gyro that doesn't exist anymore, but they were business to business specialists in marketing and creativity. And I felt there was a good fit there. And then they acquired this huge company called Merkle, which was very big in the B2B space. And they just saw the fit and what we could offer, that they didn't have a research agency. So we could not only offer them something differently, but we could go on joint pitches with some of their creative companies and, help them bring something else to the table. So it was a good fit, and these things are never that easy, even though they were the ones we earmarked to sell to. It took a while, but in the end, we got it over the line.
Did you stay for the whole earnout?
Yeah, all of us did. My dad stepped away straight away. He'd never worked for anyone. And he said, I'm not about to. So he stepped away, and I worked the full earnout, and then I worked for an extra year as well after that. And then it just, I suppose when you're working for a corporate, they were excellent in those 4 years in that they pretty much did leave us to do what we were doing, which was, investing in marketing, growing the brand, winning clients in, opening up different offices. And it was great once we were part of a global network like that, because you could just drop a person in Singapore and straight away you've got a Singapore office. And, you didn't have the setup costs. So we could quite quickly grow the company. But then as part of a corporate, and once the earnout was gone, then there was restrictions coming in, quarterly shareholder numbers to meet. And it was a great experience. And I enjoyed sitting on the other side of the fence. But I think once you're an entrepreneur and once you're used to that fast pace of life, and it was meetings for meeting's sake a lot of the times, and, you couldn't pivot and change direction, that you just couldn't sign things off quickly in order to move in different directions as quick as I wanted. So in the end, yes, I left the company behind.
So then you took the obvious step, just to create a podcast, right?
Well, I mean, I suppose it looks a bit weird, but yes and no. So my role within B2B International was, in the early days, was everything. And then, you'd start to build then your specialisms. But from an early age, as I've said, we set out the offices with a, North Star vision to grow into a global company. Equally, every month we had board meetings. There was just the three of us, and then we were given roles, and I was given the role of marketing. So I looked after marketing for the company throughout the course of the time being there. And I was a geologist, as I mentioned, by profession or by education. And so I quite quickly had to immerse myself in the world of marketing. But it was just something I fell in love with in terms of marketing and branding. So at B2B International, I looked after marketing, and as one of the many levers that we used in order to raise brand awareness, we started a podcast. It was called B2B Insights Podcast. I was the host in the majority of cases, but we used to share it around across the team and interview different people in the team. So I spearheaded that and got a taste for podcasting. And then when I left, it was still a baby of mine, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought equally, I knew that I didn't want to just retire to the golf course or whatever, and I was never going to do that. So I wanted to keep my eye in on business and trends and keep sharp in that respect. So I asked if I could take that podcast when I left, of which they didn't want me to. So in a way, that was a blessing, because I could set up the podcast with a new name. And the most successful mini-series we ran under B2B Insights Podcast was something called The World's Greatest Business Thinkers. It was a mini-series of about 5 or 6 different interviews with academics that had got books that they'd launched, and it was received very well. So I just thought, well, I'll start a new podcast, call it that. I invited some of those guests that were on that first mini-series on, which gave me a few guests and a bit of momentum. And then I just started reaching out to a few contacts I'd had over my time in business. And it's been amazing where it's led me, actually. I've not only do I thoroughly enjoy, speaking to these world's greatest business thinkers, of which they are, but I enjoy, for anyone viewing this, you can see the books behind me. I love immersing myself in their new books, and it's a good platform for them to raise awareness of their new books as well. So it ticks a lot of boxes, and it keeps me sharp and keeps me very busy now. It's gone from strength to strength.
So now are you, would you say you're a full-time podcaster?
I would really. I mean, I don't know about you, Tom. You're running a company and doing podcasting as well, but it's no. I mean, I definitely have a lot more time to do things that I love, and there's a side venture that, again, I'll come on to it. I'm sat in here in my sweaty paddle clothes right now, and I've fallen in love with the game of paddle, and so I'm setting up a clothing brand specific for paddle.
Oh, nice! Yeah, jump on the trend. Did you do a lot of market research into the growth in demand for paddle gear?
Yeah, well, I've done, I've obviously done my homework in terms of looking at the growth trajectory. My son, he's on a scholarship in America playing tennis. So I've traveled a lot with him in Europe playing tennis. And so I'm going back quite a few years now. I was playing in Sweden in 2019. And so, I've seen they did the boom bust thing where they've definitely invested in too many paddle courts there. But in the UK and in the US, this trajectory is upwards. And I really do think there's this space for a brand in the market now. So that's coming in 2026. So that's happening alongside the podcast. But yeah, I never imagined where the podcast would take me. And it is. I'm filling my time with a bit of paddle and a lot of interviewing. But booking the right guests is the right thing. Is the most important thing, as you well know. And so making sure I work it into people's diaries. But, having some of these people, you can see from the books behind me, some of the Gary Hamel, Daniel Pink, Guy Kawasaki talking about his time with Steve Jobs. I mean, I've seen these people on stage probably 15, 20 years ago, Dan Pink and Gary Hamel. And here I am interviewing them, for one of their latest book releases. So it's definitely a bucket list ticked for myself.
Oh yeah, there's some business legends. If a listener was going to choose one episode to start with, which would you suggest?
A lot of people do ask me that, and it's a tricky one because I suppose it depends on your interest, on what you're looking at. So for marketing purposes, for example, then I'm a big fan of Mark Ritson and his mini MBA.
Came on twice, didn't he?
He's only been on once on this podcast, but he was on my previous podcast. For any viewers that want to see it, look on the YouTube channel, because in fact, that's what's gone through the roof in terms of viewers. I think we nearly got something like 100,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel now. I'm speaking to him in his bedroom. He lives in Tasmania in the main, but he's got a place in Sydney, and anyway, you just have a look or watch the end of that. It's quite amusing on how he finishes that particular podcast. So for marketing, he's definitely a great head to get into. I think, I've mentioned Dan Pink. He's definitely a hero of mine. I've read a lot of his books, but there is something for everyone. Rory Sutherland, I spoke to him on stage in London just a couple of weeks ago. He was probably the hardest guest because of the knowledge that he holds and where his brain surfs to in terms of conversations. So trying to keep him on track and trying to get to where I wanted to with the podcast. He was probably the most challenging, but the most fun because he's just such a great person to have on the show.
So that's the skill of the host, isn't it?
I suppose it goes back full circle to my interviewing, my market research early days, on being on the phone, listening to respondents and taking it where you not wanted it to go.
Exactly. And this is why when people are doing things well, I try to look to understand like why. And then with you, it's like kind of almost perfect that now you can spend a lot of time running a podcast that's based on like business theory and you being the host. Like you're obviously very passionate about it. You've done it for 25 years, essentially. So it just makes total sense that you would be the ideal host for that type of podcast, which then also probably starts to explain why it seems to be growing nicely.
I hope so, Tom. And I mean, I think it can't be a one-sided conversation, can it? A good podcast episode. And I think so being able to not only get the best out of your guest, but bring something to it in terms of life experiences and then get them to, feed off that and build on that. And yeah, through my 25 years in business, dealing across all industry sectors, from all manner of different companies, from mainly mid-market up to corporates. I've got so many different stories and experiences that I can piggyback on to throw into the mix when talking to guests. So hopefully that brings, a different element to the conversation that they might not hear on other podcasts.
Totally agree. All right, Nick, we need to finish there. We will obviously link to the show, specifically YouTube, so anyone listening, go and subscribe. And I love how you had the open loop to the end of the Mark Ritson episode. You just have to listen to that. We'll link to your LinkedIn profile. Anything else we should link to or mention? Is the paddle brand live yet, or that's in progress?
So it's going live within the next week or so. So don't know when this is going live, but it will be. It's a holding page, but there'll be socials out there. It takes a while to get this clothing piece, with the getting the prototypes and the designs and everything. But we're talking in the final stages of signing off the designs. Then we'll be moving to prototypes, and we're looking for an October launch of this year. In the meantime, you can sign up on the website when it does go live, and that'll be mill.club. That's the brand name. And joining that club, joining that community, we'll be looking for feedback. I suppose, again, from a market research route, I want to stay close to the customer to get that feedback. So, please do sign up, and we'll keep you in the loop. And, those people that are close within that community, and we're looking for some feedback on the first initial designs, and hopefully you can get to wear some of those too.
As we've learned, the input from the customer is critical. And it makes total sense that I can't wait to read the customer survey you're going to be sending the early customers for Mill.club. The questions are going to be on point, aren't they? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And all of that will be linked below.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, team. There we go. Go and check out the world's greatest business thinkers, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, etc. Check out the Mark Ritson episode. Also, the episode I just finished was the Tony Chocolonely CEO episode, which is super interesting because that brand is incredible. Massive shout out to Nick for coming on. Massive shout out to Fame for producing the show. And a massive shout out to you for listening.